Right now, you just took a breath. You didn't think about it. You didn't choose how. But the way you just breathed, the exact pathway that air took into your body, may be quietly working against you. Every hour, every day, for your entire life. That low hum of fatigue you sometimes feel by mid-afternoon. That tightness in your chest when you're stressed. That restless, unsatisfying sleep where you wake up just as tired as when you lay down. The real answer for why has almost nothing to do with stress, or screens, or coffee. It goes back to your jaw, to your nose, to a slow, silent shift in the human face that took thousands of years to happen, and only a few generations to go catastrophically wrong. Here is the strange part. Breathing is the only function in your body that is both completely automatic and completely controllable. Your heart beats without your permission. Your liver filters blood without asking. But breath sits in both worlds. It happens whether you think about it or not, and yet you can change it instantly, just by deciding to. Which means breath is the one place where your unconscious habits and your conscious choices collide 20,000 times a day. And for most people, those unconscious habits are broken. To understand how this happened, you have to go back. Not to your childhood. Further than that, to the skulls of your ancestors. Harvard evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman has spent decades studying how the human skull changed over time, and one of his findings is unsettling. The jaws and airways of humans today are noticeably smaller and more crowded than those of humans who lived just a few thousand years ago. Skulls from hunter-gatherer populations show wide dental arches, straight teeth with room to spare, and broad nasal passages. Modern skulls, by comparison, often show crowded teeth, narrow palates, and constricted airways. What changed? Not your genes, your food. For most of human history, eating was work. Tough meat, fibrous plants, raw roots. Chewing this kind of food for hours a day, starting in infancy, acted like a slow, natural orthodontic treatment. It widened the jaw. It expanded the palate. It carved out space for the airway behind it. Then food became soft. Cooking, processing, and refining food meant chewing became easier. And a jaw that isn't challenged doesn't grow to its full size. Generation by generation, the human face began to retreat inward. The palate narrowed. The airway behind the nose and throat became smaller and more crowded. And a body with a smaller airway has to find another way to get enough air. It opens the mouth. Mouth breathing isn't a personality quirk. It's often a structural compromise, a workaround for an airway that doesn't have enough room. And once that pattern starts, especially in childhood, it can reinforce itself. A mouth that hangs open doesn't provide the same support to the roof of the mouth as a tongue resting against the palate does. Over time, the face can grow longer and narrower instead of wider. The airway gets even tighter. The cycle continues. So what does this actually feel like day to day? In 2019, science journalist James Nestor ran an experiment with researchers at Stanford, including Dr. Jayakar Nayak from the university's Nasal and Sinus Center. For 10 days, Nestor and a colleague had their nostrils completely plugged with silicone and tape, forcing them to breathe only through their mouths 24 hours a day. The results were fast, and they were dramatic. Within days, blood pressure rose. Heart rate variability, a key marker of how well the nervous system handles stress, declined. Sleep quality collapsed. Snoring increased so much that it crossed into the range associated with mild sleep apnea in people who had no history of breathing problems at all. Carbon dioxide levels in the blood became erratic. Cognitive sharpness dropped. They felt foggy, tired, and on edge. Then, for the second half of the experiment, they switched. Nostrils unplugged, nasal breathing only. Within days, almost everything reversed. Blood pressure dropped back down. Snoring nearly disappeared. Sleep deepened. The fog lifted. Same people, same environment, same diet. The only variable that changed was which hole the air went through. Here is where it gets stranger. You might assume that more air is always better. More oxygen in, more energy out, like fuel into an engine. But the body doesn't work that way, and one man figured this out almost by accident, decades before anyone was paying attention. In the 1950s, a Soviet physician named Konstantin Buteyko was working in a hospital ward filled with critically ill patients. He noticed something odd. The sicker a patient was, the heavier and faster they tended to breathe. Healthy people, by contrast, breathed lightly, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Buteyko's conclusion was the opposite of what most people would guess. He proposed that chronic overbreathing, taking in more air than the body actually needs, wasn't a side effect of poor health. In many cases, it was a cause of it. Why would breathing too much be bad for you? Doesn't your body just use what it needs and exhale the rest? The answer lies in carbon dioxide. Most people think of CO2 purely as waste, a gas your body wants to get rid of as fast as possible. But CO2 also plays a critical role in how your blood releases oxygen to your tissues and organs. If you breathe too fast and expel too much CO2, your blood can actually become more oxygen-rich on paper, while your cells receive less oxygen in practice, because the chemical signal that tells oxygen to let go and enter your tissues has been disrupted. Chronic overbreathers, people who take in slightly more air than they need with every single breath, day after day, year after year, can end up in a strange paradox. Their bodies are starved for oxygen at the cellular level, even while their lungs are working overtime. And this connects directly back to your nose. Breathing through your nose doesn't just filter and warm the air. The nasal passages produce a molecule called nitric oxide, which gets carried down into the lungs with each breath. Nitric oxide helps relax and widen blood vessels, including the tiny vessels in your lungs that absorb oxygen. Some research has found that nasal breathing can increase oxygen uptake by around 15 to 20% compared to mouth breathing, simply because of this one molecule that mouth breathing bypasses entirely. Your nose isn't just a passive air intake. It's a chemical processing plant that mouth breathing skips completely. There's one more piece to this, and it might be the most important one. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, known for his work on what he calls the polyvagal theory, has spent decades studying the vagus nerve, the long nerve that runs from your brainstem down through your chest and abdomen, connecting to your heart, lungs, and digestive organs. The vagus nerve is the primary communication line for your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you responsible for rest, digestion, and recovery. Here's the connection. The way you breathe directly stimulates or suppresses this nerve. Short, shallow breaths, especially ones that involve quick inhales and rushed exhales, tend to activate your sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight branch. Slow breaths, particularly ones where the exhale is longer than the inhale, stimulate the vagus nerve and shift your body toward calm. This means your breath isn't just reflecting your emotional state, it's creating it. Think about what this means for someone living in the modern world. A narrowed airway, inherited from generations of softer food. A habit of mouth breathing, reinforced since childhood. Chronic mild overbreathing, the kind Buteyko identified as a hidden driver of poor health. And short, shallow, Chest-based breaths that keep the nervous system tilted toward stress, hour after hour, without a single conscious thought. None of this looks like a crisis. There's no dramatic moment where you notice it happening. It's just a baseline, a slightly foggier brain, a slightly more anxious resting state, a slightly worse night of sleep, every single night, for years. And because it's the baseline, you don't know anything is wrong. You don't have anything to compare it to. This is simply what being you has always felt like. But here's what's strange. The fix doesn't require new technology, new research, or new equipment. It requires going back to something your ancestors did without thinking, something that got quietly engineered out of your daily life by softer food, sedentary postures, and a culture that talks while it breathes through open mouths. Close your mouth. Breathe through your nose. Let your exhale last a little longer than your inhale. Notice when your chest is doing the work instead of your diaphragm, the large muscle beneath your lungs that should be expanding your belly with every breath, not just lifting your shoulders. None of this is complicated. All of it is invisible, which is exactly why it's been wrong for so long without anyone noticing. Right now, take another breath. This time, actually notice it. Notice whether the air moved through your nose or slipped in through your mouth. Notice whether your belly expanded or your shoulders rose. Notice the length of your exhale compared to your inhale. That breath, the one you didn't think about a few minutes ago, is either quietly working for you or quietly working against you. And for the first time in your life, you get to choose which.